Está-se bem ou quê? Ora. Tu. Bom. Como é que é, pessoal? Está tudo bem ou quê? Se calhar a música está muito alta, não? Se calhar... Talvez não. Pronto. Agora está fixe. Bom. Então o que é que eu vou fazer hoje? Vou mostrar o que é que vos estava a fazer. Ora bem. Onde é que está? Exato. Aqui está ele, acho eu. É isto mesmo. Então. Oh, sério? Olha. Estou tramado. A sério? A sério? Bom. Isto assim fica tramado de trabalhar. Se não tenho um link. Ora bem. Vamos um bocadinho de spam. Bem, onde é que está mais? Divulgações. Bom, fogo, não me diga. Meto aqui os pés há muito tempo e ninguém fala. Toma. Deixa lá ver. Se não estou cá, botes. Pois é. Agora não sei. Não sei mesmo o que é que vou fazer. Sei que isto aqui é o dashboard. Ai, ai. Bem. Show layout. Olha o Sanito Azul, como é que é? Estão de voltas às lives, sim? Epá, eu voltei às lives, pá, estive muito ocupado. Foi mais esse o problema, sabes? Estive bem ocupado, pá, com cenas do Free Code Camp e... Não é sério. Mas pronto, está tudo. Está tudo bem, isso é o que importa. Bom. Vamos fazer isto. Estas coisas não estão assim muito fixe, mas acho que dá para perceber a ideia. Pelo menos, se eu tiver aqui um container, isto há de ser diferente, como é normal. Não sei se dá para pôr certo. Ok. Já não faz scrolling. Ui. Portanto, vou ligar isto para não andar com lhe confundir todo. Vamos esconder isto. Agora aqui. Aqui. E tenho que fazer alguma coisa. Não sei muito bem o que, mas tenho que fazer. Ai, estou aqui à espera. Isso está difícil. Dashboard. Ok. Gosto muito mais do Medium. Quatro é pequeno também, portanto 32, não muito exagerado. Aqui isto com letra grande fica fixe. Deixa eu ver se há aqui um... Era fixe, era pôr isto capitalizado logo. Não dá. Participantes. Information. Ok. Se não der deste, olha. Azarito. Azarito mesmo. Sério? Pá, então... São lixo. O que é que eu vou fazer? Olha, coisas... A sério. Porquê que o mundo é assim? Bem, vou aprender Node. Vou aprender Node, olha, exatamente isso. Bom, para quem não sabe, e quem estiver por aí, eu não estou a ver quem está a falar na stream, mas... Grande treta. Vem lá. Ora, Pronto. Como é que é, gato? Estás bom, meu? Ai, ai. Meus custos. Pá, pois está atrasadinho e agora ainda me atrasaram ainda mais. Disseram que não tinham nada, man. Not with React. Ok. Olha, vou tirar aqui o curso online. Pronto, vou ver aqui.
In the last video, you learned how to use require to load in modules that come with Node.js. In this video, you are going to learn how to use require to load in other files you created inside of your project. This is going to let you move functions outside of app.js into more specific files, which is going to make your application easier to scale, easier to test, and easier.
Ligar aqui o VS Code. Pronto. O curso é este, é o The Complete Node.js Developer Course. Se quiseres eu posso te mandar o link. Tens aqui udemy.com/complete. Pronto, eu posso pôr o link aí. Pá, curti da cena. Estou a curtir até. Eu explico mesmo tudo. Ok, vou-te mandar pelo Discord. Onde é que isto está? Aqui, não sei se não. Isto já tinha sido falado na partilha até. Acho que o gajo atualizou isto. I failed to load this link library documentation. Certo, normal. Ok, vamos ver.
To get started, the first thing we're going to do is make that new file. Now, in the context of our Notes app, the new file is going to store various functions for writing and reading notes. For the moment, we're not going to be worrying about that functionality, but we are going to create the file where it will eventually live. This file is going to be notes.js, and we're going to save it inside of the root of our application, right alongside app.js and greetings.txt.
Isto se calhar com o som não se está a ouvir muito bem, né? O que ele diz, se calhar... Já te mandei pelo Discord, meu. Já te mandei. Já te mandei. Ora... Isto também... Vou fazer de outra maneira. Aqui isto... Yeah. Como é que é, Sanita Azul? Estás boa, pá? Eu bem que falei contigo, não respondeste nada. Portanto... NPM... Já não lembro como é que eu recorro isto. Starting up. Certo. Yeah. Mas o que ele vai fazer aqui? Certo, não vai passar nada. Vai sempre escrever ali. Então para que é esse projeto? Este projeto não é para nada, eu só estou a aprender, ok? Estou a aprender aqui um Node.js.
For the moment, all we're going to do inside of Notes is used.
Não sei se ouve bem por causa do som. O que é que vocês dizem? Gostava de saber esse feedback. Jeez, espera aí. Como é que é, Calci19? Estás bom, meu? Que programas utilizas para fazer código? Epá, é muito conforme. Tudo o que for do lado de front-end... aliás, eu sou IntelliJ, ok? Mas para coisas mais simples, eu sou VS Code, ok? Acho que tem isso lá em baixo. Se calhar não tenho. Não tenho. Não tenho. Estou a ver aqui os panels, pensava que tinha aqui, afinal não tenho nada disso. Está certo. Bom. Pronto, se eu fizer aqui notes, o que faz isto é só ir aqui a este greetings txt e meto qual é o user. Estive a aprender umas bases de HTML, CSS e JavaScript. Ótimo, boa. E então, como é que está a correr esse percurso? Fala mais sobre isso. Ora bem, bom. O que é isto? Restart to update. Bem, vou fazer um restartzinho. Tem muito boa qualificação. Pois tem, meu. Foi na faculdade, tive uma cadeira disso. Boa. Já estás em algum trabalho? Como assim, algum trabalho? Eu trabalho neste momento, sim, na área. Eu trabalho no grupo empresa, sim, tenho. No grupo empresa. No grupo da SIG, Express, Visão, essas marcas. Então é como front-end. Faço JavaScript maioritariamente. Resolvo issues, basicamente. Ok. Ele está a dizer... Não, tudo errado. Node.js. Eu curti, mas o professor é tipo uma beca morto. Mas era uma beca morto. Porquê que era uma beca morto? Mas curtiste é fixe. Pronto. Menos mal.
Starting notes.js. Perfect. Now we have a log on the top of notes and one on the top of app. I'm going to change that to app.js.
Certo. Mas o que é que estás a fazer com o Node? Eu não estou a fazer agora nada com o Node, só estou a aprender aqui cenas que ele está a dizer no curso, mais nada, só estou aqui a ver as videoaulas e estou a aprender. Agora neste momento é requiring your own files. É fazer só... é só fazer isto, acho eu. Import app. Não pode ser import, tem que ser mesmo let app igual a require app. Pronto, é isto. Aliás, isto é sempre o mesmo, portanto é uma const. Pode ser uma constante isto. Não sei se é isto que ela vai fazer, mas presumo.
With this in place, we can now require the notes file. It doesn't export any functionality, but that's fine. By the way, when I say export,
eu já fiz isto.
The notes file, it doesn't have any functions or properties.
Nem parecia.
In this video, we are going to use Yargs, a third-party NPM module, to make the process of parsing much
Já fiz isto aqui, pessoal. Peço desculpa. Sou Zenab.
without needing to write a manual parser. This is a great example of when you should look for an NPM module. We're about to write some really boring code if we don't use a module. It's much more productive for our Node application to use a third-party module that has been tested and thoroughly vetted.
Mas era este o projeto. Pelos vistos era. Tá certo. Se eu vou fazer uma app node, pá, sim, futuramente hei de fazer. Bom, vou passar aqui umas aulas à frente e fazer isto assim. Ok. Isto aqui sei fazer. Ai não, olha, que giro. Ah, não tem NPM sequer. Como assim, pá? NPM. What? The fuck? E o da Alfarroba vais fazer em quê? Eu não vou fazer em nada, ok? O da Alfarroba é já há programadores, já há código já feito em Mongo, Angular. Eu supostamente ia só fazer o user interface, estás a ver? Ia também ajudar com o Angular, pá, não sei nada, mas ia pesquisar, ia ver como é que se fazia fixe. Mas não... Pá, agora estava aqui à espera de umas cenas, eles não têm. Olha, vou seguir com a minha vida em frente. Precisava aqui de alguma informação da parte deles. Não tem nada. Olha, não consigo ajudar. Por agora não consigo. Andas a aprender Ruby? Se curtes daquilo, por que não? Recursos disponíveis. Mas espera aí. Eu nem estou a perceber porque é que eu não estou... The fuck? NPM -v. Abriu, install, npm. Não seja por isso. Aquele desafio eu vou fazer em Ruby. Vais fazer em Ruby? Ih, Jesus, boa sorte. A sintaxe não é toda feia. Só que eu me lembro do Ruby. Já não me lembro muito bem. Bem, agora estou a fazer o update ao Homebrew. Peço desculpa ao pessoal. Não tem tantas merdas comparado com o PHP. Olha, capaz. É bem capaz. PHP tem tudo e mais alguma coisa, mas enfim. Tem isto partido, o NPM. Certo, fiz quase aquilo. apesar de não saber bem o que é isto. É só dizer by deleting all the npm global package include npm itself. Jesus. Yep. Bom, aqui confiar no código de um amigo. Isto não foi há muito tempo. Descarraio. Tá bom. Não tem. E diz ok. Yes. New minor version of npm available. Ok. Ora bem, npm install lodash. Fiz. Agora vou tentar replicar o que está aqui no curso. Ok, não vou fazer nada de mais. Não sei o que é que está feito depois, já não me lembro. Mas isto é, eu já fiz estas aulas, portanto. Require. Não sei escrever. Require. Notes.js. Não, só notes, né? Posso pôr já. É igual. Não, acho que não é por aí. Mas já agora. Notes.js. console.log. Starting. Notes.js. Antes. np. Não. Node.js. Pronto, é isto. Same shit. Depois. Var command é igual a process.argv 2. Ok, já percebi. Switch, ok, switch comments case add, meu Deus, vou fazer isto tudo, console.log, como é que é? Adding new code, break, case, list, vida, e mais o que? Remove, default. Outra coisa que eu queria ver aqui uma cena. Preferências settings. Tab size 2. Certo. Cannot edit with. Então calma. Isto não é tab size, de certeza. Onde é que isto são 2? Insert spaces when pressing tab. Claramente que não. Tab sizing. Não estou a perceber aqui a cena disto. Tab são 4 espaços. Mas eu não quero 4 espaços, pá, quero só 2. Vês a Lisboa? Boa, boa. Olha que se lixe. Isto na minha terra não são 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pronto, está bem. Tenho que fechar. Vou voltar a abrir. Olha, caguei. Como é que é, Tuki? Estás bom, pá, já agora? Pá, eu já meti 2, olha aí. Está aí 2. Agora tenho que fechar e voltar a abrir. Mas não volta a isso. Eu meti 2. Está tudo, man, e contigo. Sempre a andar, meu. Tua namorada queria uma prova de cavalos. Ah, certo. Então, bora daí, vem daí, pá. Para a semana. Tenho que ver se tem coisas. Tenho que ver se tem coisas para fazer. Senão a gente combina aí, qualquer coisa. Não percebo. Não percebo porque é que ele está a pôr as tabs de 4, mas pronto. É com ela. Caguei para a cena. Ora bem, listing all nodes. Codes. Ai, note. Note. Listing all nodes. Aqui presumo que seja. Ok. The note. E aqui. Command. Espera aí. Removing note. Console.log. Command not recognized. E este não precisa de break. Certo. Então, npm. Não. Node. Pronto. Command. Pronto. Deixa-me só ver aqui uma coisa. Ok, feito. E vou continuar.
Then we'll add it to the project, parsing for things like the title and the body, and we'll call all of the functions that are going to get defined over in notes.js. If the command is add, we'll call add note, so on and so forth. To get started, we can go view the docs page for Yards. It's always a good idea to know what you're getting yourself into. If you Google Yards, it should be the first result. Here we have the GitHub page for the Yards library. Now, Yards is a very complex library. It has a ton of features for validating all sorts of input, and it has different ways you can format that input. We are going to start with a very basic example, although we will be introducing more complex examples throughout this session. For now, though, This is the docs, and if you want to look at any other features that we don't discuss in the section, or you just want to see how something works we have talked about, you can always find it here. What we're going to do though is move into the terminal to install this module inside of our application. That's going to get done using npm install, followed by the module name, yargs, yargs. And in this case, I'm going to use the @ sign to specify a specific version of the module I want to use. In this case, 4.7.
Ele tá falando comigo. Ora.
Which is the most recent version at the time of this video. You can always update the latest versions of the modules to check that there's no breaking changes. If there is no breaking changes, great, stay on the latest version. If there's not, go ahead and revert. For now though, go ahead and use 4.7.1. I'm going to add the save flag, which as we know, updates the package.json file. If I leave off the save flag, yargs is going to get installed into the node modules folder, but if we wipe that node modules folder later and run npm install, yargs won't get reinstalled because it's not listed in the package.json file. This is why we use the save flag. Now that I'm installing yargs, we can move over into Atom inside of app.js and get started using it. And the basics of yargs, the very core of its feature set, is really simple to take advantage of. The first thing we're going to do is require it up above, just like we did fs and lodash. Let's make a constant and call it yargs, setting it equal to, you guessed it, require yargs. From here, we can go ahead and fetch the arguments as yargs parses them. It's taking the same process.argv array, but it's going behind the scenes and parsing it, giving us something that's much more useful than what node gives us. Up above, just above my command variable, we can make a const called argv, setting it equal to yargs.argv. Yargs.argv is where the yargs library stores its version of the arguments that your app ran. Now we can go ahead and print it out down below. And this is going to let us take a look at process.argv and the yargs.argv variable, and we can compare them and see how yargs differs. For the command where we use console.log to print process.argv, I'm going to make the first argument a string called process so we can differentiate it in the terminal. We're going to call console.log again. The first argument is going to be the string yargs, and the second one will be the actual argv variable, which comes from yargs. Now, we can go ahead and run our
yargs argv. Olha, Demon Rage, como é que é? Tá tudo bem contigo, pá? Ora, mais coisas.
Our app a few different ways and see how these two differ. First up,
Certo.
we're going to run node app.js with the add command, and we can run this very basic example. And we already know what the process.argv array looks like. The useful information is this third string inside of the array, which is add. Down below, on the other hand, yargs gives us an object that looks very different. here we have the underscore property. This is where commands like add are stored. If I were to add another command like add, and then I were to add a modifier like encrypted, you can see that add is the first argument and encrypted is the second. Now, so far, yards really isn't shining. This isn't much more useful than what we have up above. Where it really shines is when we start passing in key-value pairs, like that title example we used in the last video. I can set my title equal to secrets, hit enter, and this time around we get something much more useful. Up above, we have a string that we would need to parse in order to fetch the value and the key. Down below, we actually have a title property with a value of secrets. And yards has parsing for all the different ways to expect it. Space after title and it still works just as it did before. You could add quotes around secrets, adding another word, like secrets from Andrew. And it parses it correctly, setting the title file to string secrets from Andrew. This is where yards really shines. It makes the process of parsing your arguments much, much easier. That means, over inside of our app, we can take advantage of that parsing, calling the proper function. Let's take add, for example. Once the add command gets called, we want to call a function defined in notes that's going to be responsible for actually adding the note. Notes.addNote is going to get the job done. And what do we want to pass to add note? We want to pass in two things. The title, which...
Estou aborrecido? Não, não estou.
...is acceptable on argv.title, as we saw here, and the body, argv.body. Currently, these command line arguments, title and body, aren't required. So technically...
Como é que é, Garcia? Está tudo bem ou quê? Tudo fixe, pá? De volta aos streams, sim, sim. Eu que estive assim meio desaparecido. A verdade é essa. Notes.addNote, vamos...
Now that we have this in place, we can remove our console.log statement, which was just a placeholder, and we can move into the Notes application.
Okay. Bem disposto, sempre contigo, pá. Notes.addNote argv.title argv.body. Certo? Yeah. Depois vou fazer aqui qualquer coisa que é o que ele vai dizer a seguir. É usar o model.export. Yeah. Yeah. Notes.
I'm going to wipe what we have so far since it was just a basic example.
Oh.
And we're going to get started by making a variable with the same name as the...
Não, não, o que eu ando a fazer, não, só estou a aprender Node, epá, eu hoje era para fazer isso, era para mudar era para dar para mudar o UI e o UX do projeto da Hackanthon, mas não, mas eles não têm a cena pronta dos prototypes, então não tem o link correto, então por isso é que hoje não estou a continuar isso, supostamente era, mas não, eles hoje não têm nada. Sem informações jogos, como pode ser nesse canal. Estou a perceber a pergunta deste Martelelo que está no Slack. Bom, no Slack não, do Discord. Mas pois, eles não me respondem. Não sei. Eles não têm, pronto, basicamente, estou a aprender em concreto agora dentro do Node. Estou a aprender, sim, aprendi algumas coisas com... Estou a aprender como é que se faz aqui algumas coisas com o Node. Só que a minha parte mais interessante, acho eu, do curso aqui, não sei se ele tem, Mas acho que não, pelos vistos. Para mim é mais a organização em projetos do Node. Estou assim com algumas dúvidas sobre isto e então daí estar a fazer este curso. Estou em que aula? 14. Em quê? 24, Jesus. Deixa-me só ver uma coisinha que eu tenho que ver aqui. Portanto, é isso que estás a fazer. Aprendeste, está virado para o backend. Sim, sim. Sim, está. Está mais virado para o backend, é verdade, sim. Aqui só ver uma coisa.
Now this alone isn't too useful because we're not exporting the add note function. Down below, we can define module.exports in a slightly different way. In the past, we added properties onto exports to export them. We can actually define an entire object that gets set to exports. And in this case, we can set add note equal to the add note function defined up above. Now in ES6, there's actually a shortcut for this. When you're setting an object attribute and the value, that's a variable, and they're both exactly the same, you can actually leave off the colon and the value.
Pois,
this is identity.
era isso que eu ia fazer.
We're setting an object equal to module.exports. That object has a property add note, which points to the add note function above. Once again, this and this are identical inside of ES6. We are going to be using the ES6 syntax for everything throughout this course.
Tu não metas var, pá.
My two arguments, title and body, and actually do something. In this case, we're not going to be modifying the database just yet, although we are getting pretty close. For now, what we're going to do is call console.log, adding note, passing in the two arguments as the second and third argument to console.log, title and body. Now we're in a pretty good position.
Nunca testei muito, sabes? Portanto, não tenho assim uma opinião sobre isso. Pá, mas é Microsoft, né? Então caga lá disso. Não, estou a brincar, não sei, não vou estar a comentar isso, como é óbvio.
Then we're going to pass in title, setting it equal to secret, and we can pass in body, which is going to
malta de Angular é que acho que usa muito TypeScript. Não, eu não uso TypeScript. Não uso porque não conheço. Mas sim, é capaz. Eu por acaso conheço malta de Angular que usa muito TypeScript, sim. Que usa muito, não, que usa mesmo TypeScript. Pensando bem, até tens razão. Pá, mas é base de Microsoft, pá. Deve ter alguns bugs. Não, não sei, não faço a mínima.
Right here, we've specified three things. The command add, the title argument, which gets set to secret, and the body argument, which gets set to this is my secret. If all goes well, we'll get the appropriate flag. Let's run the command, and right here you can see adding.
Pumba! Ok. Em app. Pois, não sei escrever. Aí é que está o problema. Adding note, que porra é esta? O que é que aconteceu ao GitHub? Pois, agora a GitHub é Microsoft, mas ainda não teve tempo para ser remodelado, estás a ver? Porque a compra foi feita tipo há 2 dias, ou ontem. Não, acho que foi há 2 dias. Teve bem aí para essa notícia. O GitHub não era utilizado no desenvolvimento do Linux ou impressão minha. Não era utilizado no desenvolvimento do Linux? Acho que não tem nada a ver. Não estou a perceber bem essa questão, ou esse ponto de vista. GitHub é uma cena para pôr repositórios, para criar projetos open source, maioritariamente. Se fizer, existe outros sites que o fazem privado. O GitHub também dá para fazer privado, só que tem que ser pago. A maior parte dos projetos é tudo público. Sim, mano, o criador do Linux é que inventou o GitHub. Ah, foi? Olha, não sabia. Usas o Bitbucket, não o GitHub. Epá, ainda, é conforme. Não. Eu uso o GitHub para coisas públicas, não tenho problemas nenhum em mostrar, e Bitbucket para clientes finais. É o que eu costumo fazer. Se for projetos mesmo pessoais que não quer que sigam por agora e não sei o que, eu uso o Bitbucket para mim também, mas acho que não tenho essa necessidade por agora. Pá, eu acho que o som está muito alto, pá. Nem só um bocadinho, esperem lá. Pronto, agora sim.
We have secret, which is the title, and this is my secret, which is the body. And this log is the one we have to find right here, which is fantastic. With this in place, we now have one of our methods set up and ready to go. The next thing that we're going to do is convert the other ones. We have list, we have read, and we have remove. Let's do one more together, and then you'll do the other two by yourself. Now, the list command is right here. I'm going to remove.
Jesus. Bitbucket também tens públicos? Aí tens? Sim, tens. É verdade, é verdade. Por isso é que acho que não há necessidade de ter os dois. Epá, o Bitbucket não é assim tão público. Tu não consegues pesquisar da mesma maneira que tu pesquisas do GitHub. Acho eu. Eu tenho lá a conta e nunca vi. Pá, acho que o GitHub é muito mais aberto nesse sentido. Pá, eu conheço mais. Conheço o Git Scrum, tens o Mercurial, tens porrada deles também, que fazem a mesma coisa. O Linus Torvalds é que inventou o Git, mas ele também tem também no Git, mas ele também no GitHub, GitLabs. Ele foi o GitLab. Pera. E eu não sei que ninguém. Que egoísta. Ganda boss, faz uma contribuição e se fizer. Foi o máximo que ele fez. Já agora vou segui-lo. Toma. Eu também tenho conta no GitHub, quero dizer. Ah, ok. É um gajo bonito. Entrei no Linux kernel. Tá bem. Espera aí. Deixa lá ver isto. Jesus. Merge brands for Linux. Isto parece complicado. There are several guides for kernel developers and users. Like it in HTML and PDF. Como é que eu faço esta treta? Em C. Isto é C, não é? É. Que da piada. Também está. Ia bem. Também está. Não era só para ver as contribuições. certo. Jesus. Introduz Pro Net. Nix. Chinês, é isso? Na boa. É coisas que não são assim tão chineses, há outras. Puto, né? Estes são métodos que eles lá criam. É que não faço ideia o que é que são estes métodos. Jesus. E pronto. É assim que se torna burro em 2 segundos. Vais ao Linux e pronto. Achas isso mais feio que PHP? Se eu acho isto mais feio que PHP, olha que não. Olha que não. Digo-te já. Mas pronto, whatever. Agora o que é que a gente pode fazer aqui? Como é que se chamava mesmo? List notes igual a... Não deve ser isto. List notes. Oi. Quer ver o que é que o gajo vai fazer? Se é exatamente a mesma coisa que o Ed.
The console.log statement and call notes.getAll. At some point, getAll is going to return all of the notes. Now, once again, this is not wired up. Now, getAll doesn't take any arguments since it's going to return all of the notes regardless of the title. The read command is going to require a title, and remove will also require the title of the note you want to remove. For now, though, we can create the getAll function. Over inside of notes, we're going to go through that process again. We're going to start by making a variable, calling it getAll, and setting it equal to an arrow function, which we've used before. We start with our arguments list, then we set up the arrow, which is the equal sign and the greater than sign, then we specify the statements we want to run. Inside of our code block, we're going to run console.log getting all notes. The last step to the process after adding that semicolon is going to be to add getAll to the exploits. Here we can use getAll just like this. And what we have here is identical to this. Remember, in ES6, if you have a property whose name is identical to the value, which is a variable, you can simply remove the value variable and perfect. Now that we have this in place and we've wired it up in app.js, which I did not mean to just close, we can go ahead and run things over inside of the terminal. In this case, we're going to run that list command. Node app.js list. And right here, you can see at the bottom, getting all notes prints to the screen. And this is fantastic. Now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and remove the process log since we no longer need that. I am going to keep the yargs log around since we will be exploring other ways to use yargs throughout this section. What I'd like you to do as the challenge for this video is to create a method for the read command and the remove command. You're going to create inside of notes.js a getNote function, which is going to take the title. Then you can go ahead and use the console.log to print getting note and just print the title to make sure it works. And you're going to do the same thing for remove. Right here, you're going to call notes.removeNote, passing in the title of the note you want to remove. And once again, when you define the function, go ahead and log out the title argument to make sure it was passed in properly. Then, over in the terminal, I want you to run both of them, passing in the title and making sure the log prints as expected. Go ahead and do this. Pause the video,
Quer dizer, notes.read note notes.remove sai e sai. Bom, pessoal, vou só fumar um cigarrinho e venho já. É muito rápido. Até já.
火星に逃げるつもりだ。
back. Já voltei, maltinha. Vamos lá. Já preciso beber água. Vamos lá. Bom. Let que read note. console.log remove o quê? É só remove, né? console.log remove note. Ok, aqui vamos passar o read note e o remove. Pronto, simple as that. O gajo não. Nada. Continua com os 4. Opa, isto pessoas a fazer antes. Já é meia-noite, ok, certo. Pronto, acho que.
Check it out. Run both read and remove from the terminal to test your work, and when you're done, click play. How'd you do? Hopefully you didn't have too much trouble creating and calling both of those functions. We're going to get started with the command for read first. When the read command is used, we want to call notes.getNote, passing in the title. Now the title is going to get passed in and parsed using yargs, which means we can use argv.title to fetch it. And that's all we have to do when it comes to calling it. The next step is to define getNote, because currently it doesn't exist. Over inside of notes.js, right below getAll, we can make a variable called getNote. GetNote is going to be a function. We're going to use the arrow function. And it is going to take an argument. It's going to take the note title. GetNote takes the title, then it returns the body for that note. Inside of getNote, we can use console.log to print something like getting note, followed by the title of the note you're going to fetch, which is going to be the second argument to console.log. Perfect. That's the first one, and we can go ahead and test it before we go on to the second one, which is remove. Over in the terminal, we can use
note.js.
We're going to be using the new read command, passing in a title. I'm going to use a different syntax where title gets set equal to the value outside of quotes. I'm going to use something like accounts. This is going to read the accounts note in the future, and it's going to print it to the screen. For now, though, we get an error, which is fantastic. Getting an error is not the end of the world. Getting an error means you usually have a small typo or you forgot one step in the process. And what we're going to take a moment to do is figure out how to parse through these error messages. Because what you get, which is what I've highlighted here, can be pretty daunting. As you can see, the first line, it shows you where the error occurred. It's inside of our app.js file, and the number after the colon is the line, on line 19. It shows you the line, and it shows you exactly where things went bad. Type error. Notes.getNote is not a function. It's telling you pretty clearly that the function you tried to run, getNote, doesn't exist. And now we can take this information and go debug our app. Right here we see we call notes.getNote. Everything looks great, but when we move into notes.js, we realize that we never actually exported getNote. That is why when we try to call the function, we get getNote is not a function because we never exported it. All we have to do to fix that error message is export getNote, just like that. When I save the file and rerun the app from the terminal, now we're going to get what we expect, which is getting note, followed by the title, which is accounts. And that is how we can debug our error messages. Error messages, for the most part, contain really useful information. Right here, we have some useful information, and down below, we have a lot of useless information. This is the stack trace. It's all the code that's running to get to the point where the error happened. For the most part, the first couple lines are code that you've written, and the other ones are internal node code or third-party modules. In our case, the first line of the stack trace is important. It shows exactly where the error occurred. When you get an error inside of your app, which you totally will throughout the course, don't worry. It's usually the result of a simple mistake. In our case, we simply forgot to export the function. Now though, the read command is working, so we can move on to the last one, which is going to be the remove command. I'm going to remove the console.log statement and call notes.removeNote, passing in the title, which as we know is available under argv.title. Next up, we're going to define the remove note function over inside of our notes API file, right below getNote, var remove note. Now remove note is going to work much the same way as getNote. All it needs is the title. It can use that information to find the note and remove it from the database. This is going to be an arrow function that takes the title argument, and for the moment, we're going to print the console.log statement, removing note. Then, as the second argument, we're going to simply print that title back to the screen to make sure that it's going through the process successfully. This time around, we're not going to forget to export our remove note function. We're going to define it right here, remove note, using the ES6 syntax. The last thing to do is to test it and make sure it works. We can reload the last command using the up arrow key. We can change read to remove, and that is all we need to do. We're still passing in the title, which is great because that is what remove means. When I run the command, we get exactly what we expected. Removing note prints to the screen, and then we get the title of the note that we're supposed to be removing, which is accounts, which looks great. That is all it takes to use yargs to parse your arguments. Let's take a quick moment to recap what we learned. We learned that parsing in process.argv can be a real pain in the butt. We would have to write a lot of manual code to parse out those hyphens, the equal signs, and the optional quotes. It's a real pain. Yargs can do all of that for us, and it puts it on a really simple object we can access. Now, here we use the argv object coming from yargs to grab the title, and here we use it to grab the body. These are all the methods that we're actually going to be calling throughout the course. Currently, none of them are wired up, but we now have a place to define all of that functionality for saving notes, reading notes, listing notes, and removing notes. The last thing I want to do before we wrap this video up is switch how we fetch the command. As we know, the command is available in the underscore property as the first and only item, which means right here, we can set command equal to argv, then dot underscore, then we're going to use brackets to grab the first item in the array. With this in place.
Bem, correto. Só faltava mesmo fazer isso. Command. Argv dot.
We now have the same functionality, but we're using yargs everywhere. And if I rerun the last command, we can test that the functionality still works, and it does. Command remove shows up. That is it for this one. I will see you next time as we start filling out the individual functions. We're going to take a look first at how we can use JSON to store our notes inside of our file system. That is coming up next, so stay tuned. I will see you soon. Now that you know how to parse command line arguments using process.argv and yards, you've solved the first piece to the puzzle for the notes application. How do we get that unique input from the user? The second piece to the puzzle is how do we store this information? When someone adds a new note, we want to save it somewhere, preferably on the file system, so the next time they try to fetch, remove, or read that note, they actually get the note back. To do this, we're going to need to introduce something called JSON. Now, if you're already familiar with JSON, you probably know it is super popular. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's a way to represent JavaScript arrays and objects using a string. Now, why would you ever want to do that? Well, you might want to do that because strings are just text, and that's pretty much supported anyway. I can save JSON to a text file, and then I can read it later, parse it back into a JavaScript array or object, and do something with it. That's exactly what we're going to take a look at in this video. To explore JSON and how it works, let's go ahead and make a new folder inside of our project called Playground. Throughout the course, I'm going to create Playground folders in various projects, which stores simple one-off files that aren't a part of the bigger application. They're just a way to explore a new feature or learn a new concept. In the Playground folder, we're going to make a file called json.js. This is where we can explore how JSON works. To get started, let's make a very simple object. We're going to make a variable called obj, setting it equal to an object, and on that object, for the moment, we're just going to define one property. Name, that gets set equal to your first name. I'm going to go ahead and set this one equal to Andrew. And now let's assume we want to take this object and do something with it. We want to do something like send it between servers as a string, save it to a text file, or anything else. To do that, we're going to need to call one JSON method. Let's take a moment to define a variable to store the result, string obj. And we're going to set it equal to, in uppercase, JSON dot stringify, stringify. JSON.stringify takes your object, in this case the obj variable, and returns the JSON stringified version. That means the result stored in string object is actually a string, it's no longer an object. And we can take a look at that using console.log. I'm going to use console.log twice. First up, we're going to use the typeOf operator to print the type of the string object to make sure it actually is a string. TypeOf is an operator. It gets typed like this in lowercase. There is no camel casing. Then you pass in the variable whose type you want to check. Next up, we can use console.log to print out the contents of the string itself. Console.log, printing out the string obj variable. Perfect. What we've done is we've taken an object, converted it into a JSON string, and we're printing it out to the string. Over in the terminal, I'm going to navigate into that Playground folder. For the moment, it doesn't matter where you run the command, but in the future it is going to matter that we are in the Playground folder, so take a moment to navigate into it. Then we can use node to run our json.js file. When we run the file, we see two things. First, we get our type, which is a string, and this is great, because remember, JSON is a string. Next, we get our object, and it looks pretty similar to a JavaScript object, but there are a few differences. First up, your JSON is going to have its attribute names automatically wrapped in double quotes. This is a requirement of the JSON syntax. Next up, you'll notice your strings are also wrapped in double quotes as opposed to single quotes. Now, JSON doesn't just support string values. I could use an array, I could have a boolean, a number, or anything else. All of those types are perfectly valid inside of your JSON. In this case, we have a very simple example where we have a name property and it's set to Andrew. Now, this is the process of taking an object and converting it into a string. Next up, we're going to define a string and convert that into an object we can actually use in our app. Let's get started by making a variable called person string, and we're going to set it equal to a string using single quotes, since JSON uses double quotes inside of itself. Then we're going to define our JSON right here. We're going to start by opening and closing some curly braces. we're going to use double quotes to create our first attribute, which we'll call name. And we're going to set that attribute equal to Andrew. That means after the closing quote, we're going to add the colon, then we're going to open and close double quotes again and type the value Andrew. Next up, we can add another property. After the value Andrew, I'm going to create another property after the comma called age. The age property is going to get set equal to a number. I can use my colon and then define the number without the quotes, in this case 25. Go ahead and define your JSON to look just like this. You can go ahead and use your name and your age, obviously, but make sure the rest looks identical. Now, let's say we get this JSON from a server or we grab it from a text file. Currently, it's useless. If we want to get the name value, there is no good way to do that because we're using a string. So person string dot name doesn't exist. What we need to do is take this string and convert it back into an object. To do this, we're going to use the opposite of JSON.stringify, which is JSON.parse. Let's make a variable to store the result. I'm going to create a person variable, and it's going to get set equal to JSON.parse, passing in as the one and only argument the string you want to parse. In this case, the person string, which we defined up above. Now what this does is it takes your JSON and it converts it from a string back into its original form, which could be an array or it could be an object. In our case, it converts it back into an object, and we have the person object right here. And we can prove it's an object by using the type of operator. I'm going to use console.log twice, just like we did above. First up, we're going to print the type of person. Whoops, that's type of, not just type. And second up, we're going to print the actual person variable. Console.log person. Perfect. With this in place, we can now run on the command. I'm actually going to start node mon. And I'm going to pass in json.js. And right here you see we're working with an object, which is great, and we have our regular object below. We know it's an object because it's not wrapped in double quotes. The values don't have any quotes, and we use single quotes for Andrew, which is valid in JavaScript, but it's not valid in JSON. And that's the entire process of taking an object, converting it to a string, and then taking the string and converting it back into the object. And this is exactly what we're going to be doing in the Notes app. The only difference is we're going to be taking this string and storing it in a file. Then later on, we're going to be reading that string from the file using json.parse to convert it back to an object. With the basics in place, let's go ahead and take it just one step further. What I'd like to do is actually store this string in a file. Then I want to read the contents of that file back using the fs module and printing some properties from it. That means we're going to need to convert the string, which we get back from fs.readFileSync, into an object using json.parse. Let's go ahead and comment out. All the code we have so far and start with a clean slate. I am going to leave it up there though as a reminder of the various methods we've introduced throughout this video. First up, let's go ahead and load in fs. The const fs is going to get set equal to require, and we're going to require the fs module, which we've used in the past. The next thing we're going to do is define that object. This is the one that's going to be stored inside of our file, and this is the one that's going to be read back and parsed. This is going to be a variable called original note. And I'm calling it original note because later on we're going to load it back in and we'll call that variable note. Now original note is going to be a regular JavaScript object to properties. We're going to have that title property, which we'll set equal to some title, and we're going to have that body property, which we'll set equal to some body. The next step that you are going to need to do is take original note and create a variable called original note string and set that variable equal to the JSON value of the object we defined above. That means that you're going to need to use one of the two JSON methods we used previously in this video. Now once you have that original note string variable, we can go ahead and write a file to the file.
Uns memes para a malta que nasceu nos anos 90.
fs.writeFileSync. WriteFileSync, which we used before, takes two arguments. The first
Já
one
vou
is
ver
the
isso.
file name.
Agora estou
And
aqui
since we're using
concentrado.
JSON, it's important to use the
Parte em que estava. Ok. Como é que era? Original. Note igual a objeto, certo? Title. Title. Body. Some body. Original node string.
JSON file extension. I'm going to call this one notes.json, and the text content is going to be that original note string, which is not yet defined but will be defined once you fill this line out. And this is the first step to the process. This is how we're going to write that file into the playground folder. The next step to the process is going to be to read out the contents, parse it using the JSON method above, and print one of the properties to the screen to make sure it's an object. In this case, we're going to print the title. The first step is going to be to use a method we haven't used yet. We're going to use the read method available on the file system module to read the contents. Let's make a variable called note string. The note string is going to get set equal to fs.readFileSync. Now readFileSync is similar to writeFileSync, except it doesn't take the text content, since it's getting the text content back for you. In this case, we just specify the first argument. which is the file name, notes.json. Now that we have the string, it's going to be your job to take that string, use one of the methods above, and convert it back into an object. You can call that variable note. Next up, down below, the only thing left to do is test that things are working as expected by printing using console.log the type of note. Then below that, we'll use console.log to print the title. Note.title. Your job for this video is going to be to make these two things work by filling out these two lines. Both original note string, you have to make that variable, and the note variable, both are going to require a call to a JSON method. Now over in the terminal, you can see I saved the file in a broken state and it crashed. That's expected when you're using node-mon. So take a moment, pause the video, knock this out.
Ok. Original node string. Stringify original node. Node igual a json.parse node string. Then
and click play. If you've done things correctly, you should be able to see that the type of is an object and that note title equals some title. You should also see a brand new file in the playground folder. Go ahead and open it up and take a look at what you got. Knock it out, then go ahead and click play.
Gostei desta parte, por
The
acaso.
first thing I'm going to do is fill out this original note string. It's going to be a variable called original note string, and we're going to set it equal to the return value from json.stringify. Now we know json.stringify takes our regular object and it converts it into a string. In this case, we're going to take the original note object and convert that into a string. The next line, which we already have filled out, is going to save that JSON value into the file notes.json. Then we read that value out, and the next step is going to be convert it back into a regular JavaScript object or array, depending on whatever you save. Here, we're going to pass in note string, which we're getting from the file. With this in place, we are now done. When I save the file, node-mon is going to automatically restart, and we would expect to not see an error. Instead, we're expecting that we're going to see the object type as well as the note title. And here we go. Right over here inside of the terminal, we have an object and some title printing to the screen. With this in place, we are now done. We've successfully completed the challenge. This is exactly how we are going to save our notes. When someone adds a new note, we're going to use this code to save it. When someone wants to read their note, we're going to use this code to read it. Now, what if someone wants to add a note? That's going to require us to first read all of the notes. Then we're going to modify the notes array. Then we're going to use the code above to save the new array back into the file.
Obrigado, vai lá, Garcia. Muito obrigado por estares aí, pá.
You can see right here we have our JSON code inside.
Grande abraço, pá. Tchau, tchau, até amanhã.
JSON is actually a file format that's supported by most text editors. So I actually already have some nice syntax highlighting built in. Now in the next video, we're going to be filling out the add note function using the exact same logic that we just used inside of this video. So let's take a quick second to recap. First up, JSON is nothing more than a string that kind of looks like a JavaScript object, with the notable differences being that it uses double quotes instead of single quotes, and all of your property names, like a name and age in this case, require quotes around them. Now, when you want to create some JSON, you can do that using a regular JavaScript object, passing it into the JSON.stringified method. That takes your object and converts it to a JSON string. When you have a JSON string and you want to convert it back into an object, you simply take that string and you pass it into JSON.parse. This returns an object whose properties you can access. With this in place, we are now ready to move on to the next video and start really filling out the functionality for the Notes app. I am super excited to get started, so stay tuned. I will see you next time. In the last video, you learned how to work with JSON inside of Node.js, and as we know, this is the exact format we're going to be using for the Notes application. When you first run a command, we'll load in all the notes that might already exist, then we'll run the command whether it's adding, removing, or reading notes, and finally, if we've updated the array, like we will when we add and remove notes, we're going to save that new notes back into the JSON file. Now, this is all going to happen inside of add note, the function we defined in notes.js. And we already wired up this function. In the past, we ran the app add command, and this function executed with the title and body arguments. Since we already have that wired up, I'm going to go ahead and remove the console.log statement, and we can start filling this one out. To get started, the first thing I want to do is create a variable called notes, and for the moment, we're going to set it equal to an empty array, just like this, using our square brackets. Now that we have the empty array, we can go ahead and make a variable called note, which is the individual note. This is going to represent the new note. On that note, we're going to have the two properties you probably already expected, a title and a body. Now, title can get set equal to the title variable, but as we know, inside of ES6, we can simply remove it when both values are the same. Title and body right here. Now we have the note and we have the notes array. The next step in the process is going to be to add the note to the notes array. Notes.push is going to let us do just that. The push method on an array lets you pass in an item which gets added to the end of the array, and in this case, we're going to pass in the note object. So we have an empty array, we add our one item, and now we push it in, which means we have an array with one item. The next step in the process is going to be to update the file. Now, we don't have a file in place, but we can load in fs and start creating one. Up above, let's go ahead and load in fs. I'm going to create a const called fs and set it equal to the return result from require, and we're going to require the fs module, which is a core node module, so there is no need to install it using npm. And with this in place, we can take advantage of fs down inside of add note. Right after we push our item onto the notes array, we're going to call fs.write file sync, which we've used before. We know we need to pass in two things: the file name, I'm going to call this one notes-data.json, and then we're going to pass in the content we want to save, which in this case is going to be the stringified notes array, which means we can call json.stringify, passing in notes. Now, we could have broken this out into its own variable and referenced the variable here, but since we're only going to be using it in one place, I find this is the better solution. Now, at this point, when we add a new note, it's going to update the notes data JSON file, which will be created on the machine since it does not exist, and the note will sit inside of it. Now, it's important to note currently, every time you add a new note, it's going to wipe all existing ones because we never load in the existing ones. But we can get started testing that this works as expected. I'm going to save the file, and over inside of the terminal, we can run this using node app.js. Since we want to add a note, we are going to be using that add command, which we set up. Then we're going to specify our title and our body. The title can get set equal to something like secret. And for the body, I'm going to go ahead and set it equal to the string, some body here. Excellent. Now, when we run this command from the terminal, we're going to see what we'd expect. A couple of the file commands we added. We see the command add was executed, and we have our yargs arguments right here. Everything looks great. The title and the body do show up. Back inside of Atom, we also see we have a new notes-data.json file. And right here we have our note with the title secret and the body some body here. And this is fantastic. This is the first step in wiring up that add note function. We have an existing notes file, and we do want to take advantage of these notes. If notes already exist, we don't want to simply wipe them every time someone adds a new note. That means up above at the beginning of the add note function, we're going to want to go ahead and fetch those notes. I'm actually going to do it right here, below where I define the notes and note variable. Inside of here, we're going to use fs.readFileSync, which we've already explored. This is going to take the file name, in our case, notes-data.json. Now, we are going to want to store the return value from readFileSync on a variable. I'm going to call that variable notes string. Since this is the string version, we haven't passed it through json.parse. Then, down below, I can set notes, the variable we defined up above, equal to the return value from json.parse. json.parse is going to take the string from the file we read, and it's going to parse it into an array. Right here, we can pass in notes string just like this. Awesome. With this in place, adding a new note is no longer going to remove all of the notes that were already there. We have a note with a title of secret and a body of some body here. I'm going to use the up arrow key to load in the last command, and I'm going to navigate over to the title and change it to secret2 and rerun the command. This time around, you can see we now have two notes inside of our file. We have an array with two objects. The first one has the title of secret, and the second one has the title of secret2, which is brilliant. Now there is a problem here. If the notes data file does not exist, which it won't when the user first runs the command, I'm going to go ahead and delete it to show you what happens. The program is going to crash. We can prove this by simply rerunning the last command after deleting the note-data.json file. Right here, you can see we're actually getting a JavaScript error. No such file or directory exists. It's trying to open up the notes-data.json file, but without much success. To fix this, we're going to use a try-catch statement from JavaScript, which hopefully you've seen in the past. If you haven't, we're going to go over it really quick. To create a try-catch, all you do is you type try, which is a reserved keyword, and then you open and close a set of curly braces. Inside of here is the code that you're going to run. This is the code that may or may not throw an error. Down below, you're going to specify the catch block. Now the catch block is going to take an argument, an error argument, and it also has a code block that runs. This code is going to run if and only if one of your errors in try actually occurs. So if we load the file using readFileSync and the file exists, that's fine, catch is never going to run. If it fails, catch will run, and we can do something to recover from that error. With this in place, all we're going to do is move these two lines into try. That's it. Nothing else needs to happen. We don't need to put any code in catch, although you do need to define the catch block. Now let's take a look at what happens. The first thing that happens is we create our static variables, nothing special there. Then we try to load in the file. If this fails, that is fine, because we already defined notes to be an empty array. And if the file doesn't exist and it fails, then we probably want an empty array for notes anyways, because clearly there are no notes. There's no file. Next up, we're going to parse that data into notes. There is a chance this fails if there's invalid data in the notes-data.json file. So these two lines, they could have problems, and by putting them in try-catch, we're basically guaranteeing that the program isn't going to work unexpectedly, even if the file doesn't exist, or if it does exist, but it contains corrupted data. With this in place, we can now save notes and rerun that last command. Note, I do not have the notes data file in place. When I run the command, we don't see any errors. Everything seems to run as expected. And when I visit Atom, you can see the notes data file does indeed exist, and the data inside of it looks great. This is all we need to do to fetch the notes, update the notes with the new note, and finally save the notes to the screen. Now there is still a slight problem with add note. Currently, add note, it allows for duplicate titles. I could already have a note in the JSON file with the title of secret. I could come along and try to add a new note with the title of secret, and it's not going to throw an error. What I'd like to do is make the title unique. So if there's already a note with that title, it's going to throw an error, letting you know to create a note with a different title. The first step to that process is going to be to loop through all of the notes after we load them in and check if there are any duplicates. If there are duplicates, we're not going to call these two lines. If there is no duplicates, then it's fine. We will call both of these lines, updating the notes data file. Now we're going to be refactoring this function down the line. Things are getting a little wonky and a little out of control, but for the moment, we can add this functionality right into the function. Let's go ahead and make a variable called duplicate notes. Duplicate notes is going to eventually store an array with all of the notes that already exist inside of the notes array that have the title of the note you're trying to create. Now this means if the duplicate notes array has any items, that's bad. That means the note already exists and we should not add the note. This is going to get set equal to a call to notes, which is our array of notes, dot filter. Filter is an array method that takes a callback. We're going to use an arrow function, and that callback is going to get called with the argument. In this case, it's going to be the singular version. If I have an array of notes, it's going to get called with an individual note. This function gets called once for every item in the array, and you have the opportunity to return either true or false. If you return true, it's going to keep that item in the array, which will eventually get saved into duplicate notes. If you return false, the new array it generates, it's not going to have that item inside of it. All we want to do is return true if the titles match, which means we can return if note.title triple equals title. If they are equal, then this is going to result in true, and the item will be kept in the array, which means there are duplicate notes. If the titles are not equal, which is most likely the case, it's going to result in false, and duplicate notes will be empty. Now we can simplify this a little more using arrow functions. Arrow functions actually allow you to remove the curly braces if you simply have one statement like we do here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this statement to the clipboard, excluding the return keyword and the semicolon. Then what I'm going to do is delete everything from the closing curly brace to the opening curly brace. Right here, I can paste in my statement. This is perfectly valid using ES6 arrow functions. You have your arguments on the left, you have your arrow, and on the right, you have one expression. The expression doesn't take a semicolon, and it's automatically returned as the function result. This means the code we have here is identical to the code we had earlier, only it's much simpler, and it only takes up one line. Now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and check the length of duplicate notes. If the length of duplicate notes is greater than 0, that means we don't want to save the note because a note already exists with that title. If it is 0, we're going to go ahead and save the note. If duplicate notes dot length is equal to 0. Here inside of the if condition, we're comparing the notes length with the number 0. If they are equal, then we do want to go ahead and push the note onto the notes array and save the file. I'm going to cut these two lines and paste them right inside of the if statement. If they're not equal, that's okay too. In that case, we're going to go ahead and do nothing. With this in place, we can now save our file and test this functionality out. We have our notes data file, and it already has a note with a title of secret2. Let's rerun the last command to try to add a new note with that same title. We run the command, we head back into our JSON file, and you can see right here we still just have one note. And this is fantastic. Now all of the titles inside of our application are going to be unique, so we can use these titles to fetch notes and delete notes. Let's go ahead and test real quick that other notes can still be added. I'm going to change the title from secret2 to secret, run that command, and over here inside of our notes data file, you can see both notes show up, which is awesome. That is it for this video. In this one, we filled out the add note function. As I mentioned, we are going to be doing some refactoring since this code, which loads the file, and this code, which saves the file, they're going to be used in most of the functions down below. But for now, everything works great. We're able to add notes using the command line, and we're able to save those notes into a JSON file. That is it for this one. I will see you next time where we do that refactoring. From there, we'll be able to quickly fill out get all, get note, and remove note, because we'll have those reusable functions that we can take advantage of. See ya soon. In the last video, you created the add note function, which works well. It starts by creating some static variables, then we fetch any existing notes, we check for duplicates. If there are none, we push it onto the list, then we save the data back into the file system. And this is great. The only problem is that we're going to be doing a lot of these steps over and over again for every method down below. For example, get all. The idea is to fetch all of the notes, send them back to app.js so it can print them to the screen for the user. The first thing we're going to do inside of here is have the same exact code. We're going to have our try catch block to fetch the existing notes. Now this is a problem because we're going to be repeating code throughout the application. It's going to be best to break out the fetching of notes and the saving of notes down below into separate functions that we can call in multiple locations. Up above, I'd like to get started by creating two new functions. The first one is going to be called fetch notes. It's going to be an arrow function, and it's not going to take any arguments since it's going to be fetching notes from the file system. We'll fill that out in just a second. The second function we're going to create is called save notes. Now save notes is going to need to take an argument. It's going to need to take that notes array you want to save to the file system. We're going to set it equal to an arrow function. Then we're going to go ahead and provide our argument, which I will name notes. Excellent. Now that we have these two functions, we can go ahead and start moving some of the functionality from add note up into the individual functions. First up, let's do fetch notes. Fetch notes is going to need this try catch block. I'm actually going to cut it out of add note and paste it up above. And this alone is not enough because currently we don't return anything from the function. And what we want to do is return the notes. That means instead of saving the result from json.parse onto the notes variable, which we haven't defined, we're going to go ahead and simply return it to the calling function. So if I call fetch notes down below, I will get the notes array because of this line. Now, if there are no notes, maybe there's no file at all, or there's a file but the data isn't JSON, you can go ahead and return an empty array. And we're going to do that inside of catch. Because remember, catch runs if anything inside of try fails. Now this lets us simplify add note even further. We can remove the empty space, and we can take the array that we set on the notes variable and remove it, and instead call fetch notes. With this in place, we now have the exact same functionality we had before, but we have a reusable function, fetch notes, which we can use down below to handle the other commands that our app is going to support. And this is awesome. Instead of copying code and having it in multiple places in your file, we've broken it into one place. If we ever want to change how this functionality works, whether we want to change the file name or some of the logic, like the try catch block, we can change it once instead of having to change it in every function down below. Now the same thing is going to go for save notes. Save notes is going to take the notes variable and it's going to save it using fs.writeFileSave. I'm going to cut out the line down below in add note that does this and paste it up above. Now save notes doesn't need to return anything. In this case, we're going to copy the line in there and then call save notes down below. This might seem like overkill. We've essentially taken one line and replaced it with a different line, but it is a good idea to start getting in the habit of creating reusable functions. Now calling save notes with no data is not going to work. We want to pass in the notes variable, which is our notes array defined up above. With this in place, the add note function should now work as it did before we did any of our refactoring. I'm going to remove that line there, putting all the variable declarations next to each other. Next step in the process is going to be to test this out by creating a new note. We already have two notes with a title of secret and a title of secret2. Let's go ahead and make a third one using node app.js. We're going to use the add command and we're going to pass in a title of to buy and a body of food. Awesome. This should create a new note, and if I run the command, you can see we don't have any obvious errors. And over inside of our file, if I scroll to the right, we have our brand new note with a title of to buy and a body of food. So everything is working as expected, even though we've refactored the code. Now the next thing I want to do inside of add note is take a moment to return the note that's getting added. And that's going to happen right after save notes comes back. We're going to return note. This note is going to get returned to whoever called the function. And in that case, it's going to get returned to app.js, where we call it right here. We can make a variable to store this result. and we can call it note. Now your challenge for this video is going to be to print a message. If note exists, then we know the note was created. That means we can go ahead and print a message like note created, and we can print out the note title and the note body. Now if note does not exist, if it's undefined, that means there was a duplicate and that note title already. Exists. If that's the case, I want you to print an error message like note title already in use. There's a ton of different ways you could do this. You can use an if statement to check what the note variable equals. You could use a library like Lodash to do your type checking for you. Whatever way you have.
Espera aí. Bem pessoal, tchau. Até amanhã. Fim da stream. Tchau, tchau.